across South Asian region not come on the agenda of the 13th SAARC summit, we'll go on hunger strike in Dhaka. We announced it in Dhaka. We'll sit in front of your High Commission, Indian High Commission, Bangladesh Foreign Ministry, because these are three culprits, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, who are very restrictive about their visa regime. We will raise the banners, flags of Nepal, Maldives, Sri Lanka, and Bhutan, and will be thumping the doors of the high commissions, which are very restrictive. This should be on the agenda, and we have proposed in yesterday's request, and I'll again formally place on record and request to Foreign Minister that we want a paragraph to be included in the 13th SAARC summit. We know the 13th SAARC summit will not be able to take the decision, but at least in the 13th SAARC declaration, a paragraph we have proposed, I'll be just formally handing over that to the Foreign Minister, that date may be included in the 13th SAARC declaration. And I also want to share my experience, bitter experience with the Foreign Minister, that even if he'll agree, if his Director General South Asia, and if Director General South Asia in the South Bloc, if Director General South Asia in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Bangladesh, if they will not, in their meeting, the officers will not bring it on the agenda, it cannot come on the agenda of the 13th SAARC summit. Even if at that stage Foreign Minister will say, okay, bring it on the agenda, it cannot come. First, those officials, we should also meet delegations. Our SAPMA delegation should meet His Excellency or Her Excellency, Director General of South Asian Affairs, in each foreign ministry to bring it on the agenda. If it comes on their agenda, on those excellencies agenda, then it will come to the agenda of the lesser excellencies, that is summit, 13th SAARC summit. So, these were my contentions. I again raised before the Foreign Minister, and we hope his support will continue with us. And now I think his own support base is expanded with the very supportive speech by the President of Pakistan. Thank you very much.
Suddenly, if something happens, again the media switches off. This whole process comes to a kind of a grinding halt. This has happened in the past. And I would say because India is the largest democracy, we're the biggest press in the whole of the area, and perhaps the biggest in the world also. And this conflict has not been able to be resolved because of national interests. And if you sometimes tend to go against the national interest, what is pervades the national interest, which may necessarily not be in the national interest, you are portrayed as not being patriotic. This point was discussed here yesterday, that this whole sense of patriotism, a sense of security relationship, this is all pervaded and put against you, that you are not. This happened. But I tell you a personal example, when this Kargil syndrome happened, and naturally there was an intrusion and the Indian Army had to move and then push them out, fine. And then of course the whole process of cutting off relations with Pakistan started. It was started by the previous government in India. And then you have to do this, reduce the staff strength, railway line links stop, bus links stop, everything, no travel, no visa, nothing. And Pakistan High Commission in Delhi, which used to issue at least 1,000 visas daily, issued hardly 120 visas in the whole year. That happened 2 or 3 years. And because people like me and friends like Imtiaz and others who are here, we felt very badly about it. What's all this happening? Suddenly some government says that, yeah, this is, now Pakistan is to be is the enemy, therefore you switch off. But that basic, you see that feeling, that reconciliation is the groundwork, is the basis on which our whole entire relationship has to be conducted in the subcontinent. And it should not be affected, influenced from time to time by the positions taken by respective governments, national positions taken by respective governments, of switching on, switching off relationship between the two countries. Reflected the government's national position on that subject of Pakistan has to be ostracized and whatever. Similarly, of course, I won't speak for Pakistan, Mr. Khalid Ahmad will do it, but since we access Pakistan media almost on a daily basis, I do it at least, and same thing is happening here also. Now, you have a anti-India syndrome. India is not cooperating. India is not doing this. India is not doing that. They are not prepared to make any concessions. They are not prepared to go halfway. Therefore, they are not interested. They are warmongers. They are hegemons, and they are doing whatever is needed or not doing the necessary things which are necessary for peace and reconciliation. So this sharp polarization, if you ask me, this still exists in a certain society or section of the media on both sides. Happily, because as I say that leadership in both the countries at the moment is now have decided on peace and reconciliation. And now media has not, unfortunately, given the lead in this, but they are only following what our leaders have decided, whether it is in Pakistan or whether it is in India. We are doing the same thing. Now, everybody in India now talks of peace and reconciliation, although we know there is no doubt lost between the people at the people-to-people level between Indian and the Pakistanis. They all love friendship, brotherhood, and sometimes they are foxed. The previous government in my country took a position on after this Kargil syndrome. Of course, that was a kind of a warlike situation, and then suddenly relations went down to the bottom. And Indian media also followed what the sort of government position was there. That was the national position. You have to be patriotic, you defend your country's honor, integrity, and whatever it is, we all took the line. Fine. And then suddenly, due to various factors which I don't want to explain, which all of us know what happened and didn't happen, then suddenly our Prime Minister, Mr. Vajpayee, one day finally decided, yes, we must talk to Pakistan. Met President Musharraf, and there was talk. Then suddenly there was an outcry in his own country, in our own country. Vajpayee, what is this? And BJP at that time, or even still, is pervaded as a very right-wing Hindu nationalist party, which came to power by whatever circumstances because the Congress party got weak. And what the hell are you? You are the right-wing party. You have been anti-Pakistan all your lives. Suddenly what has happened? What about you? What have you been telling us? You won an election on the basis of this kind of confrontation with Pakistan. They utilized that whole situation for their political purposes, managed to win an election in India. And then suddenly now this has come about. What has happened to you? No. Then he made very good, just as all politicians are. Well, we were like that. That was all music to our ears also, because we liked that thing to happen. And now since then it has now started. Then another kind of a syndrome started in Pakistan. When we faced we're getting ready for the last general election, some of Mr. Kasuri's, at least one or two of his cabinet colleagues issued a very kind of a statement. We see Vajpayee is the only peacemaker in the subcontinent. We see darkness in the subcontinent after Vajpayee, and he's the last hope for peace in the subcontinent. These were official statements made, but of course they are probably not being owned up, but I can name the people they have published in Pakistani media. But now, the word used was darkness will descend on the subcontinent if Vajpayee is not on the scene. So the whole process now was linked to one individual. It was not linked to the civil society in two countries, which wants peace and reconciliation, or the political forces by and large which want, to one individual. But anyway, the Indian voters decided otherwise. So Mr. Vajpayee was retired. And now, fortunately for us, or for Pakistanis also, General Musharraf has decided to deal with the same country, minus Vajpayee. And now he finds his successor, Manmohan Singh, equally.
Our separated nationalisms and carrying forward our grand narratives. I believe that all nations do a bit of nation building. They create a kind of nationalism through textbooks. They spread this nationalism, the grand narrative of nationalism, through the media. So the media become a very important purveyor of state ideas and how the state wants to mold the personality of their citizens. The media have been freed only recently in South Asia. In India, the electronic media was dominated by the state. In Pakistan has followed suit, and now we have many private channels in the electronic media. But if you look at their performance, you'll find that they're still following their separate national grand narratives, which means that you interpret ancient history differently from each other. You interpret the events leading to the partition differently from each other. In fact, in terms of mutually hostile interpretations. That you look at what has happened after 1947. You create a jurisprudence which is mutually exclusive. In fact, the moment you bring the two narratives together by bringing the representatives of the two together, you will immediately reach a deadlock. I believe that the media has also been reaching a deadlock, and that is why the media has been sealed from each other. The media, a nationalist media, survives only when it is sealed from the outside world. The grand narrative of any nation is valid only as long as it's sealed from the outside world. The moment it is ventilated, it is subverted. And I'll tell you how our nationalisms have been subverted in the past, and more recently, subverted even more. I think that the media is now at a crossroads. The media in India and Pakistan have to decide what they're going to do in terms of actually communicating to each other the need for reconciliation, accommodation, and ultimate normalization. I will have to admit here that the impulse has not come from within. The intellectual resource for self-correction is not so much in South Asia. But luckily, South Asia is being invaded by the world. And South Asia now realizes that it has a status outside this region. South Asia realizes that it can actually reach a place of distinction at the global level, and it has to break out of the regional narratives. And it is in this light that we have to look at what our media does. I think the media still fights. Recently, without being propelled by the media, the government of Pakistan moved towards India and was received positively, and a process of normalization was initiated. Our media was in a way ready because many private channels had opened up, and some of the Indian guests had to sit with Pakistani counterparts and discuss the bilateral question. And one could immediately see that both of them were finding it very difficult to break out of the jurisprudence of the grand narratives on both sides. The moment you start talking about Kashmir, an Indian and a Pakistani will deadlock in short order. But what has been happening, I think very subversively, is that people from India and Pakistan are leaving the region and creating their own impressions about this region outside. We have academics, Indian and Pakistani academics, who are writing their books abroad and constantly violating the national narratives. I will give you just a few examples, recent examples. There is this excellent book on Kashmir written by Chitralekha Zutshi. She teaches in the United States. She completely violates the Indian narrative on Kashmir, and of course completely destroys the Pakistani stance on Kashmir. We have Aisha Jalal, who wrote her book and said there is no evidence on ground that there were two nations existing in India. And there is equally no evidence that there was one nation existing in India. But she is outside. She is free to violate our narratives, our nationalisms. Can the media in India and Pakistan reach that point of maturity? I believe that I have to divide in Pakistan the two languages in which the media operates. I think the English language has learned to scrutinize the functioning of the state. That is the main part played by the English language journalism in Pakistan. The Urdu medium journalism scrutinizes the status of the nation. One is highly objective because it has to look at the economy, it has to look at the functioning the responsible functioning of the various institutions of the state. On the other hand, the Urdu medium has to look at the state of nationalism. Are we on the right path in terms of the founding myths that we created when we created the state? Therefore, there is very little focus on the functioning of the economy. There is very little factual focus on the running of the institutions of the state. Although I must say that things have been changing, even in the Urdu domain. It is very difficult for the English and the Urdu journalism to communicate with each other in Pakistan. The style today is to ignore what one side of the press says and carry on regardless. It's only now and then that certain items published in the English medium and suitable to the worldview of the Urdu press are translated and published. This divide is very much there in Pakistan, and it is opposing the sudden volte-face of the state. For instance, the Urdu press is not yet completely reconciled to the fact that the state, after having indoctrinated the entire nation for 50 years in a certain way, is now proposing that we normalize with India, that we have a flexible attitude on Kashmir and not a principled stance on Kashmir. The English language press, which is exposed to external influences, and external influences will always subvert the national narrative, that they are more flexible, that they are more able to comprehend what the new process is going to be. Is it possible to somehow take the media away from the sealed national narratives? Somebody mentioned here that the news channels from the Indian TV are not being allowed to be shown in Pakistan. And it is quite understandable, because that is where the other narrative is being expressed. That is where a disappointingly contrary point of view on Kashmir and partition and what happened before partition is being expressed on the Indian side. We are not yet ready to listen to that narrative. Does this mean that the narratives are sacrosanct, that they never change? I believe that they do change, and they're changed from the outside. I'll give you just one example of how cricket umpiring has changed in India and Pakistan. It's been changed from the outside. The ICC said, okay, let's create a panel of umpires. Now a Pakistani umpire can actually give decisions in India without being suspected of nationalism. And I think sports are one arena in which nationalism is very intensely expressed. There was a time when we assumed very naturally that if an Indian umpire in India gives a Pakistani batsman out, it is because he's an Indian. We no longer, and the same thing happened on our side, we no longer question this. We have learned to go to India and make commentary on the Indian cricket without being labeled as prejudiced. Our cricketers are there, Indian cricketers come here and they do commentary here. Pakistanis no longer complain. And strangely, just as Imran Khan is a superhero in India, Tendulkar is a superhero in Pakistan. Things have changed. But this is because civil society has changed. But we'll have to see how much of civil society is acceptable to the Pakistani press, especially to the Urdu press. What do they think of civil society as a countervailing force against the power of the state? These are points to ponder. I don't believe that there is enough intellectual capacity in this region to change the narrative by itself. The narratives will have to be subverted. And I think one phase is definitely coming, because SARC has foreshadowed that, and that is the free market. What if the Indian Hindi channels were to do business in Pakistan? What if they were to collect revenue from here and the Pakistani channels did a similar thing in India, that they were beamed into India and they became dependent on getting Indian money as revenue? I think they'll have to see what they give out. Similarly, if an Indian daily writes this absolutely careless third assistant editor's written editorial on Pakistan, but if he circulates in Pakistan and has a good circulation and makes a lot of money from ads, he will not let the third editorial assistant write the editorial on Pakistan. That he will have to be careful what he says about Pakistan. And I think that Pakistan will gain if the newspapers are exchanged, if they're allowed to do business on both sides. Pakistan will gain, because the readership is very large in India. I think the Urdu press will make a killing in India. I have seen only one Urdu newspaper, and that when I went to Hyderabad some years ago. It's in the Urdu script. It sells about 50,000 copies in Hyderabad. I think Urdu can be revived in India, especially in places like Bombay, even in places like Calcutta. It can be revived if our newspapers went across. But then, would it be possible for an Urdu newspaper to write a virulently anti-Indian, nationalist-based editorial for the Indian readers to read? Kind of advertisement revenue from India. I don't believe that this argument over the national interest, which is such an elusive issue. What is national interest? Most political scientists say that this is a category that we cannot put under the telescope. This is an elusive category. And nobody can really say that there is a static, forever cemented national interest. There is no such thing as national interest. And a certain tendency will emerge in a certain period of time, and it will run its course, and then another tendency will emerge. I believe that the media on both sides are waking up to something new. They are waking up to the possibility of exposing their national makeup beyond the borders of their countries. It is now a risky business for a nationalist Indian to come to Pakistan and communicate with a Pakistani and be acceptable. Similarly, it's going to be a very difficult proposition for a Pakistani nationalist to go to India and say that my idea of what happened in India before 1947 and what happened on the day of partition and what happened in Kashmir will be listened to passively. So far, we've been quarreling. It has always been a traumatic experience to go to India and talk to your friends, erstwhile friends, about these topics and then get into a deadlock immediately. More circulation of journalists, more exchange of publications is going to blunt the edge of our nationalisms. I say again and again, these nationalisms have to be subverted. Some of it is being subverted by the world outside, but more of it we have to subvert ourselves. Only then I think the media will genuinely move towards an impulse for reconciliation. Thank you.
Chairman, the Honorable Foreign Minister of Pakistan, moderator, panelists, participants, ladies and gentlemen. Yesterday and today, having listened to deliberations of this conference, the fourth SAFMA, I am reminded of a conversation I had in 1986, not long after the launching of SARC. A reasonably highly placed gentleman told me that what is SARC after all? It's India, Pakistan, plus a few other countries of the subcontinent. So, having listened to our distinguished speakers and panelists, I have also come to this conclusion that SAARC is dominated by only two countries of this region. And this morning, except Rita Manchanda, the references that we heard of related to India-Pakistan relations. We are now reconciled to this, and being a small country of this subcontinent, although population-wise, as someone said yesterday, we rank the 7th most populous country in the world. I'll begin by referring to India-Pakistan relations, because the ups and downs in the bilateral relationship Bangladesh and India, we have oftentimes since seen that reflected the thinking, the official line of the Foreign Office. Because they thought by doing so, newspapers on both sides of the border are engaged in long-distance reporting of this issue, rather than investigating the story themselves. We have heard of, picking up stories from intelligence sources, which are very dangerous because they may have their own axe to grind. These stories do not necessarily promote the interest of either state. So, my humble submission would be that instead of depending entirely on intelligence or other sources or briefings from unidentified official sources, they would be better advised to use their own sources wherever possible, send their correspondents, and to find out the truth and report objectively. In this respect, Indian newspapers are much more resourceful than Bangladeshi newspapers. They have so many editions. The mainstream national newspapers have so many editions, with 3-4 of these papers having editions from Calcutta. They can assign their correspondents to do reporting objectively, fairly, and faithfully on these things.
On this pact has been fuel to a lot of commercial areas of the pact. Therefore, we fully support the fight for access to information. Number 2 is regarding the visa matter again. Mr. Minister, Sri Lanka took a bold initiative very recently to grant visa for SAARC nationals on arrival. We have a separate desk at the airport to grant visa at the airport. But when we journalists applied for visa for Pakistan, we got the visa with a line saying valid only for Lahore. This is highly embarrassing. This is valid for Lahore only. Black, very boldly written line. This is very highly disturbing to us, and which we see as a violation of diplomatic norms of reciprocity in our part. Therefore, we support and we pledge to hold the flag of SAFMA in this matter in Sri Lanka as well. Thank you very much.
Before that, I'll briefly sum up as to what has transpired till now. Almost all panelists have agreed to the idea of little more vigorous interaction between journalists from the subcontinent. Indeed, there is an information deficit in South Asia that needs to be gotten over. And that won't happen unless we are able to inject a degree or a level of consciousness amongst the respective governments. And for that, maybe we have to take adversarial positions, which is not very easy. All of us know the foreign offices are, of all our countries, they are very sensitive to criticism. And one has had personal experiences where they just slam the door shut on your face. And so the bread and butter stories don't come your way. The policy stories, after all, the policy is decided by the government, and that has to be reported as well. So one has to strike a fine balance between, and somebody mentioned about investigative journalism. I think it ceased to exist in the subcontinent. There's nothing like investigative journalism. Somebody comes, some vested interest walks into your office, gives you a huge file and says, this is it, and you perhaps make your few inquiries here and there, and then publish that, vomit that stuff in the columns of the newspaper, claiming that to be investigative journalism, while it is perhaps serving some vested interest. You would know. There's a book called Spike, which a senior police officer who was a very cerebral person, a good friend of mine, gave it to me just to mock at journalists, to say that, look, you may pretend to be very well informed and you may think that you are setting the agenda, but actually you're being used. That book is all about celebrated journalists who, in the twilight of his career, realizes that all the decorations and the awards and the encomiums that he got were very much part of the agenda of a very high-profile, very resourceful intelligence agency. This happens to all of us. It happens to the best of us. But there is no need to lose heart, I suppose, because times are changing. And with changing times, the government shall also change. When I think that this, nobody wants to expand the bureaucracy because they effectively run the government. What one needs to do is to make them more sensitive and conscious towards sharing some of their powers with the civil society, accepting the fact that the civil society has a right to know. And so long as that acceptance is not there, civil societies shall remain emasculated in the cerebral attainments to create an involvement over issues which touch them directly. There is an element of education which has to be, there should be greater spread of education in our societies.
We have people in South, which almost is half of India, but you have Tamil, Telugu and Malayalam press. And my personal findings are that if you go to the South and read those papers and media, they accord a very low priority to Kashmir or Indo-Pak relations. They have other concerns. So I think that it will be too much of a generalization to project one uniform trend in operating in Delhi, which is a full-time channel, news, views and comments and whatever you have in Bangla. Thank you.
The latest example, in fact, there's a major controversy in India these days over the arrest of a very revered religious leader in a murder case, and that the basis of that controversy was triggered by news reports in a vernacular Tamil weekly, which did some investigative work and raised questions, and thereafter it became a subject of public political debate, and the Chief Minister acted. Now, that is what civil societies are all about. That here was a person whom one couldn't think of touching. But here is a person who has been brought to explain his position before the law. For all you know, he may prove to be innocent. But it shows that the system is there and nobody is above the law. If we can at least assure that in our respective societies or in our leadership constituencies, I think a purpose would have been served.
Yes, please.
Yes, Mr. Ashwan Chaudhary, and after that Mr. Patel. Mr. Chaudhary, please.
We have this understanding that the media in this South Asia, within the region and also within the respective countries, we followed the official line. Now the breach of this reconciliation is going on. That is why sometimes when we were the partners of official line of being in the war, now we are the partners of reconciliation because the official line is for the reconciliation. President Musharraf, he is for reconciliation. His Indian counterpart, that is not the counterpart, earlier Prime Minister Vajpayee and the present Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, they are also for reconciliation. So the India and Pakistan press is for reconciliation. But are we talking or are we thinking that we should remain only to be partners, or we should take a lead role of being in the media, lead role of saying and dictating, motivating the policymakers, politicians to be in the process of peace. That role yet we are not finding. Sitting in this conference, you, Mr. Vinod, you have been saying that we are interacting. We are interacting inside the wall of this conference room. In Pakistan press today, accepting the words of President Musharraf, there is nothing what we have discussed has come out. Not even the speech of Mr. Imtiaz Alam, the spirit of
No, I think that's not true. After Mr. Musharraf's speech, there are excerpts from speeches.
Very little.
I think I read the papers properly.
No, the dominant part is that the official statements and addresses. Now the question is that we should come out of this syndrome, that is the official line. You talked about alternative journalism. The journalist community, when we will be able to form that, I do not know. But we, the journalist community, also must come out. That is, we should, whatever we discuss in this hall also, we should have our own space in our own newspapers about these things.
If you pick up part of the English newspapers in Pakistan, then you see that they largely reflect what the establishments have been saying. And from my personal experience as a representative for a foreign news agency, we are confronted with a situation in which the majority of journalists, they would like to hear and reproduce what the state is saying, what the establishment is saying. We are sometimes told that you are ambassadors of this country. You should try to project the country's viewpoint. But the issue is, if we also start doing that, where is the line between an independent opinion produced by a journalist and what the government is saying? So here in Abdullah Saab should, I think, give this margin and to Khalid Ahmed Saab and to the people who think independently. And I think there should be a consensus on that, and many senior panelists here would agree that this is the state in a country like Pakistan, in a state like India, or for that matter even Sri Lanka, I think carries a much, much bigger responsibility. As somebody was saying here that for over 50 years we were having a principled position. I think that's again Khalid Ahmed Saab said. Now we have gone back on that principled position. We are telling the people whom we were using for our objective that, well, that was wrong. So now the state carries a bigger responsibility to convince the people, yes, we were wrong. I think maybe the state also owes an apology to the people who have suffered for following what the government has been saying.
Not to be subjective, not to follow official lines. When they're writing and when they're typing their stories or editorials, do they really ever feel that they had made a commitment on such and such conference and had just not gone on a travel agency's visit? They realize it for a while. Do they really feel a pinch in their conscience that they had made a commitment and signed a declaration, which we will also sign this evening, that are you following in letter and spirit the declaration you signed in one or the other SAPMA conference? I can assure you, if all of us who are sitting in this hall, if they set this standard, high standard, that yes, we rise above the pseudo-official positions, that we rise above the stereotypes, that we rise above the narrow nationalistic positions, aggressive positions, in some ways fascistic positions, anti-human positions. If we decide, we can set the trend, change the whole media in South Asia, and also force the governments to follow that line. It will become the governments to make fool of their people. It will become very difficult for spin doctors to create hysteria or to create a egoistic atmosphere or negative atmosphere about one country or the other. We have developed this if you, I think you are in the conference, if anybody could raise his hand and say, if anybody has read this media code, you may, look, I would have been very happy if somebody would have come to me, Mr. Alam, this is not consistent, and I have more 5-6 points to add, perhaps nobody has read this. These 8, 9, 10 points, that what to do and what not to do, do's and don'ts. I am going to make a photocopy of this, make a tadeed of it, and give you everybody, and put it, and frame it and put it. I would like to have a promise. If you make another promise, that at least you will write one self-critical piece about your media in your newspaper. And if you will report from this, we are doing an evaluation in our South Asian Media Net this morning. We are collecting all of the reports. We'll make a critical evaluation of that report. We'll ask Rita Mahanchanda to make a critical evaluation of the reporting done on this conference, how it is done and how it should not have been done. And we'll send you the copy of that. So we will fulfill our purpose only if we start fulfilling the high standards of objectivity, all-sightedness, contextualization, not stereotyping. I think the SAFMA would have served its purpose. Otherwise, we would have failed in our mission and in our objectives. Lastly, I must say, and forgive me, my dear friend Sharma, Delhi press is the most embedded press in the whole of South Asia. Especially on the issues of Indo-Bangladesh relation, on the issue of Indo-Pakistan relation. There was a Maoist bombard the Bujo headquarters. So Bujo headquarters of Delhi had been bombarded. Put them with hope. And I would like to say, share our plight. You have heard the comment by Mr. Naibullah Khalid, who remains undefended in Pakistan. He was in fact saying that there is a conflict with the growth of civil society and the state. Civil society is always trying to expand its rule. State will not like to give space, most space to civil society. This is the main struggle in Pakistan, which is self-critical, which rises above the nationalistic positions, and that will reinforce each other. If Vinod will take a critical position, stand up there, no, we don't agree with this. So that will strengthen me in Pakistan, who will say, no, I do not agree with any view which will stop this reconciliation process on whatever price. For Mr. sitting here, I want to declare on behalf of SAFMA Pakistan that we will do our utmost efforts that this reconciliation process is not derailed. If it will be derailed and the government of Pakistan is responsible, we will stand up against that. If it is being done from the side of Delhi, I expect from our friends from India that they will stand up, that the reconciliation process must proceed forward. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Sujat, I will just come to you, and India made a comment about the most embedded press, subcontinent, in the Indian press. I think without entering into any kind of a debate with him, I must point out certain redeeming features of the Indian press. I'm not saying that the entire Indian press is doing the kind of job it should be doing, but I must tell you that foreign policy, defense policy, nuclear policy, these are issues that require a degree of learning. And to have commentators in the media, full-time working journalists or columnists, that kind of stuff, that kind of human material is slowly getting collected on the side of the media in different roles. It has got collected over the past few years. And those people, I don't want to name names, but at least one or two are amongst us. Dr. Rajmohan is there. Mr. Patgaonkar is there. Mr. Katyal, and many times, by what he wrote, has influenced policy. There are people who influence policy of the government, and there are people who can't be ignored by the government. I think that we must, in our respective media, promote specialization, if SAFMA can play a role in that. That specialization, that here is a person who writes on defense affairs. Now that's his full-time pursuit. Here is a person who writes on foreign policy, on nuclear issues. But these are the issues which cannot be placed in public domain for debating. These are the issues which can't in public domain where what kind of conclusion will you get? Either you have a bomb or you don't have a bomb. Only that kind of position is there. But as to go into the nitty-gritty, the fine points, we are having journalists who are today on the National Security Advisory Board of the government, and they can, in that position, influence policy. There are no restrictions on them as to what they write and what they don't write. They are influencing policy. So I think there is no reason to lose hope. And unless, and there is a course correction being made.
For inviting me to address this important meeting and for choosing the subject and the role of media in the process of reconciliation in South Asia. There is no doubt that media has a vital role to play in reinforcing positive trends in South Asia and in promoting cooperation, entering a crucial phase aimed at addressing all issues, including the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. SAFMA in recent years has come a long way. And as Mr. Imtiaz Alam was telling you, I have been a friend of SAFMA from the word go. It has become an important body of the region in promoting understanding of the crucial issues and building bridges across various divides. We believe that cooperation within SAARC is not only desirable, but also a vital objective. South Asia has had its share of conflicts, tensions, and disputes. We must transcend differences in South Asia and make our earnest contribution to uplifting the quality of life of the peoples of South Asia. Pakistan can rightfully take satisfaction at the progress SAARC has made during the past 1 year. The 12th summit in Islamabad reinvented SAARC. I had a humble role to play there. Many important decisions were taken and major developments took place at the summit, which have had a positive impact on the atmospherics in South Asia. As chairperson of SAARC during the last 1 year, Pakistan has taken several initiatives in its endeavor to promote regional cooperation. There is, of course, a general realization that Pakistan-India relations have a bearing on the overall pace of regional cooperation in South Asia. We must all direct our efforts to realizing the full potential of South Asia for peace, progress, and development. The people of South Asia crave for peace. There are greatest assets in promoting reconciliation in South Asia. Media can play a major role in bringing the peoples of South Asia together. South Asia Free Media Association is a grouping with chapters in almost all SAARC countries, perhaps in all SAARC countries, has an important role to play. SAFMA should promote informative, objective, and constructive journalism, and I've heard a lot in that connection today, and I'm vastly encouraged by the views expressed here. What we need in South Asia is an effort to bring the hearts of the people together. In Pakistan, our government has taken several steps to break free the media from shackles of gagging laws. Our media has matured into a responsible channel to champion the cause of social justice, good governance, peace, and prosperity. The media in Pakistan is playing an important advocacy role for the elimination of social evils, corruption, unemployment, illiteracy, and espousing the cause of human rights. SAFMA can play a commendable role by promoting the noble sentiments of moderation, tolerance, and coexistence. And I'd like to take this opportunity to salute Mr. Imtiaz Alam and his colleagues for the role that they've played. At the same time, the association's efforts to build social, cultural, and people-to-people contacts would help develop networks among South Asian countries. In South Asia, we must all act as messengers of hope, find creative solutions to the disputes, and make SAARC a symbol of peace and progress to ensure peace and stability in South Asia. Thank you very much. Well, I would like to make a few observations, considering the fact that a lot has been said about the current state of relations between Pakistan and India. Well, I do see light at the end of the tunnel. That's the first thing I'd like to say. Why do I say that? I say that not simply because I know that there are major constituencies for peace on both sides, but I also say that as foreign minister because I've had the good luck to interact with both the opposition and the government in India. The present opposition, which was the government, that is, I interacted with the then government and I've interacted with government now. There are grey areas which might as well be left grey, but I know one thing, that the state of relations is on the mend. There are going to be glitches. We'll have to learn to live with the glitches. And I've read some remarks today and heard rather some remarks yesterday about the president's speech here. Some people said that it was an angry speech. Let me correct you, ladies and gentlemen and friends. No, the president did not make an angry speech. He may have been pained, but I don't think it was an angry speech. I know his commitment to peace. There can be no doubt about the commitment to peace of the government of Pakistan. As far as I'm concerned personally as foreign minister, even before I became foreign minister, those of my friends, and there are a large number of friends present here, I have been committed to peace, and I took part in track 2 diplomacy as well before I was foreign minister. I'm particularly happy to be present here in this gathering. I can see so many of my friends here. In fact, I've been media friendly. Let me tell you that from the age of 6 or 7, I was attending my father's press conferences. Some of the people present here have attended my father's press conferences. And I used to always, my most embarrassing moment was when I was age 6 and I was caught overhearing when my father was talking to Abdul Ghaffar Khan, and I was hiding myself behind a curtain. So I've been involved in politics from the word go, and I find in media people who are very friendly. I've never shirked media, I've never been afraid of media, and when I became foreign minister of Pakistan, I remember the first time my trembling private secretary came and said, "Sir, there is a call for you from New Delhi from such and such a journalist." So I said, "Well, why are you trembling?" He says, "It's never happened before." Well, I said, "It'll happen now and I'll take the call." I have taken calls from Indian friends in the media. The reason is very simple, because I feel Pakistan-India relations are not going to be just dealt at one level, that is the official level. It has to be a multifaceted approach. The media has a major role to play. And, of course, the role of the opposition is vital. And it is for that reason that I have invited Mr. L.K. Advani, the leader of the opposition, to visit Pakistan. When I went to India, I called on him, and I called on many other leaders of the BJP, and I met all the top leadership of the Communist Party at the left front. Some of them had memories of Lahore. Some of them had memories of people that I had heard my father mention. And the left front leaders told me that they would be visiting Pakistan as well. The reason for all this effort is that I feel we cannot just do this at official level. We need your support. And I don't feel embarrassed in asking for that support. And I think a very valid point was raised today when somebody said, I think it was Mr. Vinod Sharma, I think he mentioned that point, that the opposition should play a responsible role in both countries. And he was right in pointing out that certain opposition parties have played a positive role when they were in power. And I mentioned this to BJP leaders, and I don't mind mentioning it at this gathering also. Nothing will take credit away from them. Mr. Vajpayee started it. So there's no reason for anybody to react today because they are in opposition. Ms. Benazir Bhutto, Mia Nawaz Sharif, when they were in power, they made a positive contribution on the issue of Pakistan-India. And the current leader of the opposition in Pakistan, Maulana Fazlur Rahman, visited India, met with the then Prime Minister Vajpayee. So I don't see why, as far as Pakistan-India relations are concerned, I think these are vital relations. They must transcend a partisan divide. I know a lot of people have criticized and they say, you know, these are our differences with you in Pakistan. I was really very happy recently. A meeting was called by an organization, I can't name which one, it was behind closed doors. And all the opposition parties were present in that meeting. And I was asked to speak on foreign policy and on relationship with India. I was moved when a top opposition leader, he said, let's give him a hand. Now, if that can happen in private, why can't it happen publicly? Well, if you don't like President Musharraf, if you don't like our government, well, you're entitled to. This happens in a free country, it happens in a democracy. But I would beseech all opposition parties in Pakistan and in India to at least spare Pakistan-India relations from partisanship. That is one thing which can happen, which will be very positive. Now, some of you may not like what I have to say. I mean, friends from India. I respect the Indian media. It has played a major role in Indian democracy. You're a pluralistic society, and it's a great pleasure to read Indian newspapers. But I did say this privately to some of the editors that I met recently in Delhi, and I'd like to say it here. I know a lot of us are very angry when we open Pakistan newspapers, and Imtiaz Alam and Mr. Ziauddin who's sitting here, and Nusrat who's sitting there. They start cursing us and attacking our policies. But what I told them in Delhi is that, it does enrage us when we read all the attacks on our foreign policy and on different aspects of our government's policies. But actually, they've created political and diplomatic space for us by voicing country opinions. And I do not believe that some of these editors, and I was addressing them, maybe some of you were present in that meeting. You were there, sir, yes. And I remarked to them that I don't think you are serving the cause of the government of India. Because I know both the parties, I've dealt with them. They want an improvement of relationship with India, but here you are, you present one blank patriotic wall. Is that really that patriotic? So, as I salute the press in India for focusing on social causes, on issues of democracy, on economic disparity, I would appeal to them that on Pakistan-India relations, considering the atmosphere that SAFMA is now beginning to generate, considering the remarks that were made by one of the speakers, which I found her presentation excellent, I think that is Rita Manchanda. We need to develop that degree of tolerance, of objectivity. If this great cause is not to remain merely a cause, but it is to start moving towards culmination. On the issue of Kashmir, because of some Kashmiri journalists, they made some points. All I would like to say is this, that the last 57 years have taught us one thing. Neither India nor Pakistan is in a position to impose their views on each other. You like to mention Kargil all the time. Well, there was a mass mobilization of troops by India, and they remained on our borders for 10 months. So the lesson of these latest encounters between Pakistan and India is that no, neither country can enforce its will on the other. That's probably just as well. Now, if they can't enforce their will on the other, what is the way out? There is a way out. And that is no war, no peace. But is that what we want? No war, no peace can get you into a war at very short notice, as we found in the past. So we need to make this process irreversible. And it is not just the media, as Mr. Imtiaz Alam was saying just now. They will find in the government of Pakistan and in me personally, President Musharraf, myself, the Prime Minister, and other leaders of this government, you'll find in all of us people who are committed to peace with India. But we want peace with honor. And can there be peace without honor? The Treaty of Versailles tells us, no, it cannot be. But it's not going to be the cost of India. Why cannot we think of a win-win situation? And when I keep on reiterating in my speeches, please involve the people of Kashmir and involve them sooner rather than later. I'm not just trying to be foreign minister. I'm not just trying to have a dig at India. I'm not just trying to indulge in a game of one-upmanship. No, I believe that the people of Kashmir will actually help the people of India and Pakistan. This is my belief. They have suffered the most, and they will therefore be very keen to provide solutions. Solutions acceptable both to the governments of India and Pakistan, of course to the people of India and Pakistan, and above all to themselves. That is the only guarantee for long-term durable peace. Because if you wish to move away from war, if you wish to move away from no war, no peace, the only way out is genuine peace. Genuine peace alone will ensure durable peace. So I think the involvement of Kashmiris in the peace process, we will be helpful. Our attitude towards the bus will be positive. Because, and in fact, I'd like to take this opportunity to say that when the bus does start, maybe that would be an opportunity, probably as good as any, or probably better than any, for that first bus on either side to carry leaders from Pakistani Kashmir and Indian Kashmir to visit each other. That will be a dramatic moment. It will be a grand gesture, as it were. And sometimes grand gestures are required, just as in private life, also in public life. And they have a grand effect.